We're live. I hope we are live on Facebook. Maybe. Okay, well, whatever. Hello. Good afternoon, and welcome to a conversation that I want to share with you today. That it was a most unbelievable time in my life. It started in 1991. Well, the project started in 1991 and it ended in 1999. And it was the first time that I was being vaulted into the national marketplace. And in the 90s, I was in the national marketplace, very, very active member of the Direct Marketing Association. As a matter of fact, I published their financial services newsletter, didn't get paid for it. And I also very proudly created the very first webinar that the DMA had ever. The webinar technology that you see today was definitely not available in 1994 and or 95, whatever year it was. So what we did was we created our presentation in some online fashion, and the individuals called in to a phone number that we gave them, and so they were listening to what they were seeing on the screen. That's how we did it back in those days, and it worked. Interesting. Well, the topic of the webinar was HIPAA. The HIPAA laws. They had just come out, and Health Insurance Privacy Act and insurance companies who were my clients in the 90s, for most of the 90s, they needed to have that information so that they knew what their obligation was. Now, we weren't the end all. It was we provided them with the initial information, and of course, they had to go to wherever to get to make it appropriate for their own organization. But we charged the people, the insurance companies, the DMA. I did on behalf of the DMA $50, and 50 people showed up. 50 companies showed up for the very first webinar, and it generated $2,500 of revenue and had very, very little expense against it. So the DMA said, "David, will you produce some more of these for us?" Actually, I did. I produced, I think, a second and a third webinar for them, and how times have changed, because with today's webinar technology, they don't need David anymore to get it set up. So 90s, I had just come off a 3-year consulting. I use that word, I hate it, but it was a 3-year marketing and sales assignment with the Brown Publishing Company, and they were located in small rural communities where they were the dominant means of people getting their information. So they were a very powerful organization with the 25 publications that they published. And I was brought in to develop a marketing and sales strategy for the crown jewel of the chain. It was the Western Star in Lebanon, Ohio. And actually, it was one of the very first publications in all of Ohio. So I put together a marketing and sales project for them. It was a 3-year project. And in that time, I also took them into the national advertising marketplace by taking all 25 publications and working as an organization as opposed to one trying to get the marketing dollars. And that worked out very well. Before I left, I think we had put out 2 publications that were corporately, but and distributed to all the folks of the 25 newspapers. That was the selling point. It worked out very well. Anyways, after completion of that project, as I kind of looked around to find out what my next challenge would be, I came across a company. Actually, they were located here in Cincinnati. The company's name was Matrix Marketing, and they were actually started by 2 gentlemen who had left Procter and Gamble to start the company, and they got their funding for the company from Cincinnati Bell Telephone. And that sounded like an interesting thing, and it was direct marketing, and that's my specialty. So I, at that time, the organization, at the time I was applying, the organization was very, very small, and I only wanted to talk to the 2 guys that started the company. David Leahy and Jim Moore. I wanted to talk with them, and I tried for probably 6 weeks to get an appointment with them. And finally, Connie Johnson, their assistant, called me up and said, "David, do you want to have an appointment with a meeting with him?" I said, "Well, yeah." So I went down there and downtown Cincinnati, and we had a great meeting. It lasted for about an hour, and Jim Moore said, "Well, David, you got an interesting story. At this point in time, there is not a fit, but if something becomes available, for sure, I'll let you know." I said, "Fine, that's fair enough." It was 6 weeks later, on a Saturday night at 6 o'clock, that Jim Orr called me up at home. I was there to answer the phone at 6 o'clock on a Saturday night. And he said, "Are you still, do you still have an interest in speaking with us?" And I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Be down here Monday morning at 9 o'clock. And I have someone I want you to meet." And so I said, "Sure, I'll be there." So I went down there Monday morning at probably 8 o'clock for the 9 o'clock. And I had a one-on-one meeting with the CEO of the company, and Dave Doherty, and we had a wonderful chat. And at the end of, I don't know, it was 30 minutes, or it definitely was not an hour, probably about 30, 45 minutes. He said, "Do you want to come with me tomorrow to go to Utah to meet some folks?" And I said, if you're paying, yeah, I'll go." So I went out with him, and I met with, it had to be 6 different folks, and I had to tell my story 6 different times. And the end of the story is I left, it was Ogden, Utah, where all those folks were, somewhere in Salt Lake. I left with a an offer, and so obviously I took the offer, and it was a wonderful personal decision that I made in my life, because the next 9 years, 8, 9 years were just wonderful, and so many great things happened. I had to had to make a notes of them, and these are the ones I remember. I didn't do any digging whatsoever. These are the ones I remember. So let me share those with you. Uh, uh, the my professional objective was to develop the first point of contact that a future customer would have, because they saw an 800 number in a television ad, and they were calling to inquire about it. That was the concept. So I had to develop a customer care script, which engaged the customer, and it, I I got to be pretty good at it. Um, early in my relationship, in my involvement with the company, a phone call or letter came into the company, and they were looking for somebody like myself to bid. Actually, at that time, to bid on the program, a proposal. No, we knew that the company was Draft, Howard Draft Advertising. It was Cobb's Draft. I don't. Cobb's Draft and Draft is a big agency that had offices in New York and Chicago. And so I called up the number, and before I called up, I did some research to try to find out who the client was, who their client was, so that I would know if I could offer something to the strategy. And I'll never forget this. I called it was either Jackie or Kevin. No, actually, it was a junior person at the agency who was taking the phone calls to, weed them out and front door them. I don't know. And so we got talking, and 30 seconds into the conversation, he said, "I think you need to talk to," and I don't remember if it was Kevin or Jackie, and I did, and it was we didn't have to bid on the project. We were going to work it out, and they wanted me to come to New York and develop a strategy. With actually, the client was Fidelity Investments. That's what my research showed. That's what they told me, and it was a wonderful challenge, because Fidelity Investments, headquartered in Boston, they built their business model was built upon communicating with the customer via telephone, and their technology that they had in their call center was probably better than the one that comparable to the one that I was working with the world's largest teleservices company. So that it was a relationship that was meant to be. At any rate, the initial objective was going to be to take an overflow of calls from their call center that they could not handle. They might do a television ad that had an 800 number in it, and they could get hit with, Fidelity would get hit with several thousand calls. And so they figured out that, they'll make the media purchase and And if they needed an overflow, that's what we were brought in to handle. So that's how it got started. I had a wonderful relationship with those folks, and um, probably about 2 years after it started, uh, I suggested to them that they do an outbound recorded campaign to their customers. And so obviously if it was to their customers, they wanted to know more about it. Well, they had a new product or service, whatever, that they were introducing, and a way for them to learn about it is to try to get their attention and have them call back in to talk with a licensed agent who could actually sell them the product. Had to be licensed to sell their products. Uh, what I suggested that we do, and it worked. We would call their individual customers during the day with the objective to leave a voicemail, thinking that they were probably at work and we wanted them to listen to a voicemail. That was going to be the contact that we had with them. And businesses, we called in the evenings to um, leave our voicemail for them. Well, at any rate, they had no idea on what kind of response rate they were going to get. Actually, they never asked me what response rate they were going to get, or what I thought they might get with that approach. At any rate, in the first 48 hours of the campaign, over 50,000 customers called back in, and they weren't prepared to handle that many phone calls. I don't know where they crossed the wires in their own company. Uh, and so overflow calls came to us, but we could not sell anything to the customers. We could just take information that they wanted, questions that they had, but we absolutely could not give answers to their questions. So it was a crazy world, and actually a vice president who apparently wasn't um, informed of the project. Uh, I was made out to be the bad guy because it worked and they couldn't handle internally. They had to come to us, and they actually didn't want to talk to me for a couple months over that whole thing. But a couple months later, we I guess we kissed and made up over the whole thing. Another campaign that I was involved in because of my relationship with Draft. The next campaign was for a product called Rogaine. And it was actually the very first introduction of the product to the marketplace. That's what the campaign was. And the interesting thing about it, if you mentioned the name of the drug, chemical, you had to have a disclaimer about it. That was the law. So instead of actually mentioning the product, the creative, and I had nothing to do with the creative of the ad, it gave I don't know, well, it was a 60-second ad, never mentioned the name, and got folks to get interested in answering and seeing what it was all about that they were talking about. That program in 2 years took over 2 million phone calls. It might have been 2.5 million phone calls. And there were less than a dozen complaint calls with the folks talking to whomever answered the phone. And so it was obviously a total success, and so successful that we were asked to present the case study at the Direct Marketing Association, which I did. I put it all together, and I had my two clients, Kevin from Draft, and wow, what was the name of the guy from Rogaine? Oh my goodness. I can describe how he looked. I can't remember his name. The three of us sat on a panel at the Direct Marketing Association, and it was a wonderful interaction. Great memory. The next campaign that Draft brought to me, was for Lexus. I was involved in the very first infomercial that Lexus ever created to promote the concept of pre-owned. That was something extremely important to Lexus and their owners. And so when you were buying, you might buy a pre-owned car, but Lexus had developed some very high standards for it. We put that campaign together. It was an infomercial, ran very successfully. The next project, it was a test that didn't work very well. We tried our hardest. We put it all together. Campbell's Soup, and I actually visited their corporate offices. Campbell's corporate offices had put together a concept, and this is probably 92 or 93, and they were testing, and it didn't test well, so it never rolled out. But we had a dedicated bank of folks answering the telephone. There's probably about 25 of them, and they had to be very well trained to take that type of phone call. So that's the kind of thing I was involved with back then. In my early years, when I was doing my training, I actually observed a program for DirecTV being set up for the first time. That was part of what I was during my training. I guess my most famous client in 91, 92, and 93 was 1-800-VISIT-PA. And it was a program that it was actually already in the company where I was, but we upgraded the program when I came in. Very controversial. Why is a contact center in Salt Lake City answering phone calls for Pennsylvania tourism? Good question. And 2 times I had to go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the state capital, to present why. Well, we were doing it because we were good at it. And the client, the state of Pennsylvania, and their agency out of Philadelphia loved the work we were doing. We were their service provider, so everything worked out well, and it was a great program. 1-800-VISIT-PA. I'm going to have to make a second and maybe third conversation. I have not even spoken about my years from 1994 to 1999, where I was strictly working with insurance companies. Insurance direct marketing was my expertise, and that's why I was involved. I had access to 19 of the 52 largest insurance companies back then, and it was a wonderful time. I learned a great deal, and we're going to talk about my 3 largest largest insurance clients were Allstate, Globe Life. Globe Life, they're not as active on television as they used to be. Oh, they at one time they were the direct mailers of insurance. When I was working with them, they were mailing 300 million pieces of direct mail and using television. So we were integrating the television and the direct mail. Uh, the greatest amount of leads and sales for them were generated from the Jerry Springer show. I mean, they every time the ad ran, they probably made 250 sales, and so they were quite happy with that. And Colonial Penn, Colonial, actually, all three of them, in one way or another, directly competed with one another. And I told each one of them that whatever we discussed there was client privilege. And so they were quite okay with that. And knowing, actually, I got at some industry trade shows, I got them all together so they could meet one another, tell stories about me, I guess. I don't know. But anyways, we're going to talk about them. Great year. Colonial Penn is an ad that I see on television multiple times a day. It's, what's his name? Charles Selling. They've actually created a second ad. I was working with them just before or as Alex Trebek was coming on as their spokesperson. And I almost met Alex Trebek in a meeting I had in Philadelphia, but it didn't happen. And at any rate, there's a great story with Allstate. I mean, you won't even believe it when I tell you. Prudential, I want to mention Prudential Insurance. At that time, they were the largest life and health. I don't think. Well, they must have had some property and casualty lines, but anyways, they were the largest insurance company in the United States, headquartered in Newark, New Jersey, downtown Newark, New Jersey. And I was invited. There was a consultant who received a $35 million contract with Prudential to help them work through Y2K. And because of my specialty in insurance marketing, I was asked to attend a meeting, and I probably spoke for a total of 5 minutes, and that was my total contribution to the project. Obviously, the world got through Y2K January 1st, 2000. I got paid zero for my intellectual property, but that was okay. I was doing a favor for some friends, and I got some dinners and lunches out of it, so that worked out okay. We'll talk about those later. And also, I am attempting to contact individuals who were impactful to me during the 90s, and I want to have a conversation. It'll be a lot of fun to have a conversation to look back on what we did back then. So that's it. Oh, one last thing, in case I don't see you before Sunday. In today's mail, I got this from, actually, it's kind of interesting. My daughter-in-law must have been taking the picture because she's not in it. But when I first got the postcard, I only saw my youngest granddaughter. I didn't see that my two other granddaughters were down here. So the picture was my son and his three daughters wishing me a happy Father's Day, and we were at Statue of Liberty Memorial Day, this last Memorial Day, um, on the first level up, and at the pedestal level up, and there's New York City skyline in the background. It was just a wonderful memory, and probably, well, no, it ranks with the best Father's Day cards I've ever gotten. My granddaughter's hand draws some really nice cards. So uh, I will absolutely. I don't know if I'll be back before, but maybe the next time that we are together will be the very best time. YouTube has